To dialogue. Chris Dairo, KTN News.
Thank you, Chris, for that. Let's revisit our top story where Jubilee wrote a fiery letter to the judiciary, and to be specific, the man at the helm of the judiciary, that is Chief Justice David Maraga. Now, Sophia Wanuna spoke to the author of that letter a few minutes ago. Let's listen into what Raphael Tuju, that is Jubilee Secretary General, had to say.
Right, let's talk about that letter we have now seen written to the Chief Justice, and this is touching on what you see to be open bias by the judiciary against Jubilee. So you have written to the Chief Justice. What's the efficacy of this kind of a letter? You've written another one before, so what do you hope to achieve now?
Well, I think we do have a right to communicate as Kenyans, just like you do have a right to say what you feel. We do have a right as a party to be able to communicate very clearly in the way that we've communicated in that letter. And we do hope that we'll get a response. But in any case, even if you don't get a response, as the African saying goes, stone even if you don't answer me, you've heard.
But this, many are saying, is that revisit the president talked about following the nullification of his first election, 8th of August. And we saw the changes yesterday in the judiciary, and that this letter is sort of like to just put in place a notice of whatever action we take here on out. Be warned, this is the justification.
I think it's a very polite letter, if you've read it, very, very polite, calling on all of us to understand the interdependence of the three arms of government. I always liken this to teenagers who say that I'm independent, Dad, don't tell me anything, I can run my life. And then 2 hours later, they ask for money to go to the mall. The judiciary is independent, but to a point. Independence is not absolute, because the judiciary also rely on the executive, the police force, and everybody else to be able to do their work. Parliament is independent. But Parliament should also be aware that, for example, if they refuse to pass the budget, even they will not get their salaries. So each branch of government does have some independence, but it is within a context. There is interdependence, and this even applies for countries. If you go to a place like the United States, it's an independent country, the most powerful country in the world. But most of their treasury bills, or not most, but a significant amount of their treasury bills are held by China. So to that extent, they are dependent on China. Okay. China is also the same. I mean, it depends on the U.S. for their market. So all of us are dependent on each other. And so it is more of interdependence rather than independence. And sometimes when you try to assert too much of your independence, it shows some amount of immaturity in understanding how institutions should relate.
Yeah. Final question on that before we go back to studio is that one would imagine you'd canvass issues of bias, as we've seen in other cases, before the same judiciary, that if there's a concern with a certain judge or how a matter is being canvassed, it still must go through those same processes to go back and say, we don't feel this and this matter is being covered in the way it should, so that when you go outside of that, what system then is in operation?
Look at it this way, and it's one of the things that we brought up in the letter. The Chief Justice did make a ruling in the case of Njue and I think Khalifa, that the case was so urgent it had to be listened to the following day at 10 o'clock. Previous to that, we had also brought a similar case, which ideally should have been listened to before the 26th of October. But he found it necessary that what was brought in by NASA or NASA surrogates were more urgent than what we brought up. And indeed, they gave us a naughty listening day on the 27th of October, a day after the elections. So really giving these post facto dates is